Fritz Bayerlein stood amid the ruins of what had once been his command post, the ground around him blasted and lifeless, resembling the scarred surface of the moon. It was 25 July 1944, and American bombers had just erased the Panzer division from the map. Bayerlein was no novice. He had fought the British across North Africa, and he had served under Rommel at El Alamein. He understood how to fight a disciplined enemy, one that advanced in measured steps and struck in patterns you could anticipate. What confronted him now was something else entirely, something beyond doctrine, something closer to total annihilation. For every Panther his crews destroyed, two more Sherman seemed to appear through the smoke. When his tanks tried to reposition, American fighter bombers plunged from the sky, turning armored vehicles into burning coffins. His soldiers had a word for what the Americans unleashed in Normandy. They called it material schlacht, the Battle of Material. There was no chapter in any German field manual that explained how to survive it. No tactical solution for such abundance. By the summer of 1944, German commanders in France faced two Western enemies, both armored, both determined, both advancing toward Germany. The British and the Americans shared tanks and artillery, yet the way they fought could not have been more different. The British were methodical and deliberate. Their offensives followed a rhythm learned through years of combat in Africa and Italy. The Americans fought with aggression and momentum, backed by an industrial engine that replaced losses almost as fast as they occurred. German commanders respected the British. They understood them, and they knew how to counter their methods. The Americans inspired something closer to fear, and that distinction would shape the fate of the war in the West. German staff officers described the British approach as a methodical sledgehammer, each offensive carefully prepared and tightly controlled. First came the artillery, massive barges lasting for hours, pulverizing forward positions with relentless precision. Veterans of the Eastern Front claimed they could sleep through Russian shelling. Yet British fire shattered nerves long before tanks appeared. Then the armor advanced, hundreds of vehicles moving in formation, grinding forward behind a wall of explosions. There was always a pattern. After advancing 5 or 10 miles, the British would halt and consolidate. They secured their flanks, brought up supplies, and prepared for the next deliberate push. Hans von Luck, commanding elements of the 21st Panzer Division, noticed something almost reassuring in these battles. His men joked that the British stopped every afternoon to brew tea, but it was not tea, it was doctrine. That caution, that refusal to overextend, created predictability, and predictability could be exploited. German commanders relied on a mobile defense known as the backhand blow, a doctrine built on patience and nerve. When the British attacked, Panzer Reserve were held back, allowing the assault to expend itself against forward defenses. Once the British paused, and they always paused, the counterattack would strike. German armor hit exposed flanks while the enemy reorganized, regaining much of the lost ground. Watching the front line bend, while holding reserves felt reckless, yet against the British it worked repeatedly. The British gained territory, the counterblow followed, and the front stabilized once more. Operation Goodwood would demonstrate this cycle with brutal clarity. On 18 July 1944, the British launched their largest armored offensive of the Normandy campaign, southeast of Caen. Operation Goodwood committed 3 armored divisions, more than 1,000 tanks, against entrenched German positions. The assault opened with 2,000 bombers, turning the forward offenses into a churning wasteland. It should have produced a breakthrough, and at first it seemed it might. German forward lines collapsed under bombardment, and British armor surged ahead across open ground. Then the advance slowed, momentum drained away, and finally it stopped. Anti-tank guns positioned in depth began destroying British vehicles, while concealed 88mm guns opened fire. British tanks burned across the fields southeast of Caen, visible markers of stalled progress. When German panzer units counterattacked, the British pulled back. In 3 days, they lost more than 300 tanks, while the front line barely shifted. German commanders recorded the outcome with grim satisfaction. The backhand blow had worked once again. The British were dangerous, but they remained predictable. Then the Americans entered the equation. 1 week after Goodwood, the Americans launched Operation Cobra from the western edge of the Normandy front. Like the British, they began with massive aerial bombardment, carpet-bombing German positions into ruin. Bayerlein himself was buried alive in his command post, the earth collapsing under the force of the blasts. What followed, however, bore no resemblance to a British advance. American tanks did not pause after breakthrough. They kept moving, pushing deeper with relentless urgency. On 1 August 1944, George Patton's Third Army became operational, unleashing a new phase of the campaign. Within days, American armor raced across France, advancing at speeds that paralyzed German command structures. Patton did not consolidate, he did not secure his flanks, and he did not wait. Tank commanders were ordered to bypass resistance, maintain momentum, and leave isolated enemy units behind. German commanders waited for the inevitable pause, positioning reserves for the backhand blow. The pause never came. General Gunther Blumentritt, Chief of Staff to Field Marshal von Rundstedt, later explained why American armor was so difficult to counter. He described Patton as the most aggressive commander the Germans faced, a general who fought like a German Panzer leader. Patton embraced risk, exploited opportunity, and moved faster than German decision cycles could react. His units appeared where intelligence insisted they could not be, striking crossroads before defenses could form. German counter-doctrine assumed an enemy who stopped to reorganize, but Patton's doctrine forbade stopping entirely. And Patton was only part of the problem. German soldiers gave American fighter bombers a name. They called them J-bows. 47 Thunderbolts dominated the skies over France, circling roads, watching relentlessly, hunting movement. Tank crews developed permanent stiffness from scanning the sky, their nerves frayed by constant threat. The distant drone of an engine signaled not just danger, but pursuit. Any movement in daylight invited destruction. J-bow spotted dust clouds from armored columns, diving within minutes with rockets and machine gun fire. Roads became burning graveyards, littered with twisted steel and shattered vehicles. This air dominance crippled German counterattacks. The backhand blow required movement, and movement meant death. German tanks hid under trees and camouflage nets, waiting for darkness to fall. By nightfall, American forces had already advanced another 20 miles. The British possessed air superiority as well. But American air power was integrated directly with ground forces. American tank commanders could summon air strikes within minutes, collapsing resistance before it could organize. Even when German gunners destroyed American tanks, the effect felt meaningless. German commanders noticed something uniquely demoralizing about fighting American armor. Destroyed tanks reappeared, losses seemed temporary, and momentum never faded. A knocked-out Panther was usually gone forever. Recovery vehicles were scarce, and spare parts were non-existent. American recovery crews worked under fire, towing damaged Sherman's back while battle still raged. Tanks disabled in the morning returned by the next day. Crews reassigned within hours. German commanders felt as though they were fighting a hydra, every blow answered by 2 more threats. Victory lost meaning, because destruction no longer reduced the enemy. Bayerlein witnessed this reality firsthand. His Panthers destroyed American tanks, yet replacements rolled forward without pause. Unlike the British, the Americans never stopped. After the war, Bayerlein described Cobra in stark terms. He said his division was not defeated, it was annihilated. Bombing transformed defensive positions into a moonscape. Tanks flipped by blast waves, crews killed without ever seeing the enemy. Then American armor surged through in a flood, overwhelming every remaining position. This was material slack in its purest form, a battle where industry outweighed tactical brilliance. German doctrine prized maneuver and training, believing skill could offset numbers. Against the Americans, those beliefs collapsed under sheer mass. The nightmare only intensified. By mid-August, the German position in Normandy had disintegrated. American forces swept around the flank, while British and Canadian units pressed from the north. The The German 7th Army was trapped near Falaise, with only a narrow escape corridor remaining. What unfolded there became a symbol of American firepower. German columns fleeing along the roads were relentlessly strafed from the air. Artillery hammered every route of escape, sealing the pocket. Pilots later claimed they could smell death from hundreds of feet above the ground. On the roads below lay an apocalypse of wreckage and bodies, drivers covering their faces just to breathe. Between 10,000 and 15,000 German soldiers died, while 50,000 more were captured. The material losses were catastrophic. Tanks, artillery, and transport vanished in days. Units that escaped emerged as fragments, no longer cohesive fighting formations. The Wehrmacht in France had been broken. Hans von Luck survived the war and later reflected on both enemies. He respected the British, calling them professional and disciplined soldiers. They fought hard, yet within limits German commanders understood. The Americans were different. Von Luck found them tactically less refined, yet overwhelming in material and audacity. Their willingness to accept risk and to keep advancing with exposed flanks made them unpredictable. Staff Officer Friedrich von Mellenthin echoed this assessment. The British were cautious professionals, the Russians an unpredictable mass. The Americans combined material dominance with aggression that erased German advantages. German doctrine had answers for Britain. It had none for what America brought. German commanders feared American armor, not because of the tanks themselves. The Sherman was not superior to the Panther or Tiger in armor or firepower. They feared what it represented: endless replacements, constant air cover, and unstoppable logistics. They feared commanders like Patton, who refused to let caution slow the advance. The British sledgehammer could be survived. The American swarm could only be endured.